Welcome to With One Accord, the Houston Chamber Choir podcast. I'm St. John Flynn, host of Behind the Music. Today's episode is made possible in part by the generous support of Silvercrest Asset Management Group, providing an unparalleled level of quality investment advice. The Houston Chamber Choir's upcoming concert, Desert Island Playlist, is a collection of some of the Houston Choir's performances that they feel are indispensable, pieces that they would want to have with them if they went on a desert island castaway. We have asked Laura Gravelin, who is the children's book specialist, I believe, at the Brazos Bookstore in Houston, to do a pairing, if you like, of some of the Houston Chamber Choir's past performances with relevant books, etc. Because the Brazos Bookstore is the Houston Chamber Choir's community partner for the Desert Island Playlist performance that's coming up. Laura, that was a long introduction, but thank you for being here. And thank you to Brazos Bookstore for partnering with us at the Houston Chamber Choir. Give us a little bit of information about the bookstore.
Yeah, of course. And, thanks for having us. We're excited to be a partner. So Brazos is Houston's oldest independent bookstore. We have been around since 1974. We are known for doing tons and tons of literary events, which fortunately now we're getting back to after, having all of them be virtual, which is quite exciting. But yeah, we were started by Karl Kilian, and then, after he retired, a group of, sort of interested community members formed an investment group and, kept the store afloat. But yeah, we love being in Houston. We love being part of the community. So this was a very exciting opportunity for us, for sure.
The bookstore is such a well-known part of the Houston cultural scene. We have asked you to look out some books that would pair well with some of the Houston Chamber Choir's favorite pieces of music that they've performed over the years. And I want to start with the Houston Chamber Choir. They performed Bob Chilcott's Circle Song, I think in 2020. And one of the movements from Circle Song is titled Chinook Songs. And you have found a great book to pair with Chinook songs.
Yeah, definitely. So for that one, we chose Joy Harjo's Weaving Sundown in a Scarlet Light. Joy Harjo is pretty much a household name by this point. She's been a poet laureate, all of that kind of stuff. But she's, really well known for her Navajo-inspired poetry. And so, when I was reading about the song and, Circle Song and about the movements and everything, and it was also inspired by Indigenous poetry, I felt like, well, Joy Harjo is the obvious choice. And then Weaving Sundown in a Scarlet Light specifically, that's just come out and it's celebrating 50 years of her being a poet. So it's kind of all of her favorite poems. It's got a foreword from Sandra Cisneros. So yeah, that one was probably one of the easier ones on the list. It was just kind of a no-brainer.
So we start off with some poetry there from one of the US's most famous poets. Let's move on to a piece that I think the choir performed earlier this year, 2022, titled El Hambo, which is by I think a Finnish composer, Jaakko Mantiavi. I hope my Finnish is correct. El Hambo is actually a Swedish folk dance, and the text of El Hambo might sound as though it's Scandinavian or Swedish, but in fact it means nothing. It's not. It's. I don't want to say it's nonsense, but it's not made up of real words, if you like. And you have found a wonderful book that's all about language and how we use language and how we relate to language that that pairs with this.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of my favorites on the list, honestly, and one of my personal all-time favorites. It's called How We're Translated by Jessica Gayton Johannesson. And so she's a Swedish author. It's been translated into English, and it's from Scribe US publisher. Uh, but yeah, it's just this really beautiful, almost quiet sort of novel. It's about a Swedish woman who is, kind of young in her late 20s, living in Edinburgh, and she has a long-term boyfriend, and he's decided he's not going to speak any English anymore. He's just going to speak Swedish, which he doesn't know. He's hoping to learn it. But yeah, the book really drives at how language connects us, all of that kind of stuff. And so I thought, particularly when reading about how none of the words in Alhambra, mean anything, yeah, it definitely got me thinking a lot about language and how we relate to each other via language, and even just via tone. You can sometimes tell, even if you don't speak someone's language, like the tone with which they're speaking, what they mean, which is a really interesting concept to explore. So yeah, so I thought that would be a good book for it.
And for choral music,
Mhm.
this is something that really is at the heart of choral music, because there is not just the meaning of the words that are sung, but it's also the sound
Yeah.
of the words that are sung. And obviously, with El Hambo, the sound of the words, I mean, they're not words, they're sounds.
Yeah.
So they satisfy language on that level, but of course, it's not a language, so it doesn't really satisfy on that level. And this book is very much about language and what it
Hmm.
means, what it does, how it connects us, etc., as you said.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think also just the importance of, there was another book that I was kind of going back and forth between the two. The other one was The Polyglot Lover by Lena Wolf, who's another Swedish author. And that one's more about a man who's searching for a lover who can love him in every language, basically. Yeah, which, I did end up going with How We Were Translated. But it is just this interesting concept that does come up quite often in books, especially in translated literature, of yeah, how we connect, particularly like very personal connections. And I think, music is definitely something that can be so personal, even if, I know a lot of choral pieces are in other languages, or in this case just sort of sounds, but that can hold a lot of meaning for sure.
And I think different languages do have different reputations. I mean, you can think of like French and maybe Italian as being, we have the sense that they are very romantic sounding languages, whereas something like German doesn't have that reputation. It doesn't sound as what we think of as being romantic. But
Yeah.
of course, you only have to listen to Wagner operas to know that German can be a very romantic language.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's move on to a world premiere from the Houston Chamber Choir. I think they last performed it in the 2019-2020 season. We're going back a long way there. Um, Desert Places, which is music by a Rice University composer, Pierre Jalbert, which is a setting, the first movement of Desert Places is a setting of a poem by Robert Frost. And the book that you have chosen to pair with this is a book about another famous American poet.
Hmm. Yeah, this one, not that I've picked favorites, but this one is probably my favorite on the list. It's Paper Houses by Dominique Fortier, and she's this incredible Quebecois author, and it's, been translated into English. But yeah, it's a fictionalization of the life of Emily Dickinson, um, and just absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous prose. But I think really it's sort of a quiet novel, but the driving force behind it is this exploration of, isolation versus community and, home as a place versus home in the wider world, which I think Desert Places also drives at a little bit.
And of course, Emily Dickinson, perfect exemplar of this, one's relationship to one's family, the outside world, um, but also one's interior,
Yeah.
because she wrote all these poems and stuffed them away in the drawers of her desk.
Yeah.
I think very, very few of them were ever published during her lifetime. But then, of course, once she died and her drawers were opened and all these poems came out, it's like, how could she not have seen the beauty in what she wrote and its ability to communicate?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's sort of an interesting, I don't know, almost an interesting dichotomy where, on the one hand, there are certain things that you create and they're very beautiful and they're more beautiful for sharing with the world and that sort of thing. But, I think one of the things that Paper Houses gets at a little bit is sometimes what makes something so special is like you do keep it for yourself and it's your own interior world and other people, especially for her time period. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't have really understood a lot about what she thought or how she felt or that kind of thing. And so, while there is sort of a loneliness to not being able to share that, there is a sort of, yeah, almost protectiveness as well. So it's sort of this like spinning coin of vulnerability where, you know, on one side you really want to show the world everything and bare your soul, and on the other side, you really want to protect yourself. But yeah, I think it's such an interesting relation, the interior world versus the exterior.
And you take a poet like Robert Frost, who, of course, was so well known
Hmm.
in his own lifetime, and you think when Robert Frost was writing a poem, he was writing it presumably with the knowledge that he had an audience out
Hmm.
there.
Yeah,
Whereas with Emily Dickinson, she wasn't writing for uh, an external audience. It was she had an audience, an internal audience of one, and I wonder what difference that makes to the words that they write.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think there's a lot of freedom in that, even if it does seem confining. On the one hand, you could look at it as she wasn't able to share her poetry, due to being a woman or, other factors. But on the other hand, there is a sort of power in being beholden to no one but yourself.
It's an honesty, perhaps,
Yeah, yeah,
absolute,
definitely.
an absolute honesty, if you
Yes.
like.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Another work that I know is a favorite for the members of the choir is called Unicornis Captivator by the, I think, Norwegian composer Ole Yelo. Um, and the choir performed this piece in, I think, 2018-19 season.
Mhm.
This is a text taken from a medieval codex, Latin, Latin words, and it's about uh, the unicorn, which is a phenomenal medieval symbol for so much. And what is the work that you have been able to pair this with?
Yeah, so this one's, a pretty perfect pairing if I do say so myself. It's a picture book. It's called The Lady and the Unicorn, and it's written by Beatrice Fontenelle, and illustrated by Vanessa Hier. And it's actually based on the medieval unicorn tapestries, which does include a tapestry, The Captive Unicorn, and the song is The Captive Unicorn. But yeah, they were these gorgeous, gorgeous medieval tapestries. I'm sure if you can't picture it in your mind, as soon as you see a photo of it, they're iconic, basically. Um, but yeah, it's so cool because it's a picture book for children, and it sort of tells the story that the tapestries are telling, but it uses that same sort of medieval art style, that we sort of associate with the tapestries or, with the Duc de Berry Book of Hours, that kind of stuff. So it's one of those like perfect ones where I'm like, it's fun for kids. It's really fun for adults, especially if they're into art.
What's interesting about the unicorn is that obviously it's a fictional animal, and yet certainly within medieval iconography, it has such a large role to play, doesn't it? It takes on a symbolic significance that really has followed it all the way down the centuries.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's one of those, sort of iconic mythical creatures of Western civilization, and I think we certainly have medieval times to thank for that, definitely. Mhm.
But there's also, certainly in the 21st century, I think people know that the unicorn is a mythical creature,
Yeah, we've
but
lost a bit of that magic.
they really want it to be real.
Mhm. Yeah,
What is it about the unicorn that gives people this fervent wish that it were real, and that at some point in the past it may well have been real?
yeah. I mean, I think that, even as adults, as when you're a kid, you're still learning the world, and so to your mind, anything is possible and everything is normal because you don't have a sense of normal. So, there's always that sense of possibility, and obviously the older we get, the more we learn about the world, and that does bring exciting stuff. You get to learn like astronomy and stuff like that that you could never possibly imagine. But you do lose a little bit of that, well, unicorns aren't real, dragons aren't real, that kind of thing. So I think there's definitely, as adults, we do like to kind of hang on to that a little bit, just in the back of our minds of, you know, this is something that very well could be out there or could have been out there historically and we don't have it anymore, but, just kind of keeping that door open for ourselves.
And the symbol of the unicorn has a purity about it.
Yeah.
Um, the unicorn becoming almost a symbol of love
Mhm.
and captured love, and
Yeah.
what are the ramifications of of love when it is not free?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely like attention to it because, having a unicorn be captured is a bit anathema, and I think that's kind of one of the driving forces of the tapestries that makes it so, sort of mournful. There's also a scene of the hunt as well. And you definitely feel for the unicorn. I think more so perhaps than you would feel for, say, like a stag or a more traditional, hunted animal. And I think that is because we really associate it with that purity and that love, and you want it to be free. You want it to, succeed. And so having it be hunted and then captive, um, you know, is a
And
little bit.
it's because the unicorn is so rare,
Hmm.
it's more precious.
Yeah, for sure. Hmm.
It's great for the choir to be able to partner with Brazos Bookstore. Um, Both the Houston Chamber Choir and Brazos Bookstore are such mainstays of the Houston uh, cultural scene. Um, Thank you very much for giving us a sense of how music and the written word come together, and the pairings that are available. I mean, I'm sure you had, I was going to say, a great time, maybe a very difficult time,
Yeah.
coming up with pairings, finding ways that songs could be paired to literary texts.
Mhm.
Was it a fun experience? Was it an
Oh,
easy experience? A straightforward experience?
it was definitely fun. I think some pieces were a bit more straightforward than others, like I mentioned, the Joy Harjo, it really felt like there couldn't be any others, but, with El Hambo, the how we are translated versus polyglot lovers, but I think that's what makes it so exciting making these pairings and these connections is they're pretty much infinite and they're very personal. So, those were just the ones that I thought of, but an audience member who's, sitting there listening to the music with their own life experience and their own reading experience might say, well, this is the obvious choice. So I think there's something really exciting in that sort of infinite possibility.
Laura Gravlin, thank you very much. Thank you for Brazos Bookstore and their partnership with the Houston Chamber Choir. And thank you to everybody who supports the Houston Chamber Choir, whether it be as a patron, a subscriber, somebody who comes to the concerts and enjoys the music. We could not do what we do without you. Thank you all very much. I'm St. John Flynn. This is Behind the Music. Join us again next time. Thank you to all who support the Houston Chamber Choir, our season underwriter, Silvercrest Asset Management Group, our patrons, donors, and subscribers. We appreciate all you do to help keep the work of the Houston Chamber Choir possible. I'm St. John Flynn, and this is Behind the Music. Join us again next time.
The Houston Chamber Choirs with One Accord is your one-stop shop for choral joy. If you enjoyed this podcast, help us to continue our mission to grow the esteem and appreciation of choral music by sharing, reviewing, and subscribing to our content. As a 501c3 nonprofit, support from listeners like you allows us to continue to create new and exciting programming. For more information about us and how you can support our work, please visit houstonchamberchoir.org/give.